Ladies and gentlemen, from the creator of Sinister Bunny Studios, this is the Metal Brain Podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Metal Brain Podcast. Today it is yet again me, solo, by myself, but today I'm going to be discussing the ever more interesting fascination with tuning guitars lower and lower. And this gets on a very, very deep, primal human level, if that makes sense. And what I'm talking about is the fascination with just lower tunings, right? Not necessarily more bass, because everybody, I think, likes more bass. But what I mean is actually tuning lower, to lower and lower registers, lower and lower notes, with the advent of moving from 6-string to 7 strings with bands like Nevermore and Korn, and a lot of new metal bands adopting the 7-string guitars back in the late 90s and whatnot. And then 8 strings became a big thing, right? And they've become especially a big thing lately. And there's so much of a big thing that I own one myself, right? I play a 7-string, I play an 8-string, I also play 6 strings, but everybody's fascination has moved to lower tunings. And it doesn't even have to be an 8-string guitar. It could be a baritone guitar that is tuned down to drop G or something like that. And I always thought that was such an interesting idea, that the lower it sounded with the note, the heavier the guitar riff or song was. And I was just trying to think about why that is. Why is it that lower tunings on guitar are heavier? And I think what it comes down to is people's kind of internalization of sound in music, right? When you see cinematic trailers for movies and stuff, what do you have? You have those low impact, 808 sounding boom, boom, right? When you see a trailer, because it brings a gravity to the situation. It brings a size to the situation. And I think the same thing translates over to guitar, right? There's this size thing that comes into play when you start tuning lower and using 8-string guitars, baritone guitars, even 9-string guitars. There's a gravitas that comes with playing in those lower registers. Now, does it necessarily make it heavier because it's lower? I think there's a lot more that plays into what makes music heavy than just the tuning. Like, for instance, the mix and the writing and the overall tonality of a song or piece of music, I think also plays into the heaviness of what it is to be considered. But the register of the guitar definitely has a place in that. And why is that? I mean, we have a fascination with low bass. We all know that there's such a thing as bass heads. These people that are obsessed with having more and more bass. And I went to high school with a lot of people that got Beats headphones and their car stereos hooked up with huge subwoofers because people like bass. And don't get me wrong, I like some good kick and bass too. Now, I don't like a bass EQ that's so crazy that it muddies everything else. I like a good thump, right? Good impact, good thump. And I can appreciate a low bass. But I think that also translates over to guitar, because it's not just an EQ thing. It's a formant idea, right? It's the root harmonic sound of a lower register note compared to one of the same note but in a higher octave. And it brings this interesting sound to a lot of music now. especially if you're into metal, which obviously I am, duh, but into like progressive metal, right? And a lot of like death metal and deathcore stuff now is adopted 8 strings and lower tunings and stuff like that, and all sorts of different bands have been using them. But what I listen to a lot is a lot of progressive metal, and a lot of bands now definitely use like 7 strings that are down tuned, drop tuned, and 8 string guitars that are even those are drop tuned to like drop E and stuff. And I've written some stuff myself in drop E because it hits a place down there that makes you just like, oh yeah, that hits good. But it brings a different flavor, I think, to what was an already established sound, and it gives variety and a new spice, because I think there's a separation between bass, like lower register as EQ, and then a lower register as in notes, like formants, and they're very different in how you need to kind of maybe view them, because they are separate, right? You can have a low register note that doesn't carry a lot of bass in terms of its tone, right? The note can be low without having a bassy tone, and that just brings a whole new world of soundscapes, specifically for guitars and even bass guitars, that wasn't already there. And I know for myself, I started to slowly gravitate as my musical abilities increased towards more progressive and outlandish sounding music, because it broke the formula. It did something different, and different was cool because it wasn't repetition. And repetition can be fine because that's how music stays catchy to people, is the repetition. However, when everything starts to sound the same, you need something new kind of zapped in there to give something different. And I think that's what these lower tunings have started to bring. And I know there is a huge divide, especially in guitar communities, but just metal communities as well that are non-musicians, where, oh, you shouldn't have to tune so low to sound better. Oh, they're just doing it because it's a fad, or it doesn't make you a better player, or somehow viewing people who play those lower registers as less experienced musicians. And I tend to wholeheartedly disagree, because it takes a different kind of skill to play an 8-string than it does a 6-string. It is a very different way of playing, because there are different ways you hold it, different ways you hit the strings. Your positioning on things is very different to mute unnecessary string noise and all sorts of crazy things. Just the hand dexterity and the stretch and all that. But it brings, like I've said, a whole new sound to things. And the fascination has been slowly going lower and lower and lower. So we went from 6-string guitars to 7-string guitars, and those were drop tuned and standard tuned. And then you got into 8-string guitars, and those are drop tuned and down tuned. And even baritone guitars have been around for a while, been around a long while. But in the metal world, people have been using them to tune super low without having a super fat neck and all the extra strings. Well, now you got people that are playing things even into 9-string guitars. Like, there's companies out there that are making 9-string guitars, and Legator, the company that makes the 8-string model that I own, also makes 9-string models. And guitar players like Dino from what is it, Fear Factory, that play some 9-string stuff, and not too many other bands that I know off the top of my head that play 9 strings, because I think that's still kind of in a very experimental world for the metal music side of things that I haven't gotten into. But it exists. There is a market for that sort of thing. And my question is, when does it stop? When will the quest for tuning lower and lower and lower and lower stop? For instance, I made a couple of videos. So there's two of note that I made on my Sinister Bunny Studios channel. One is straight up what tuning is considered too low for a guitar, where I take a simple riff and I play it in ever increasingly lower tunings. And then there is another video where I did a Jaws 2.0, my own like interesting rendition of an arrangement of like Jaws, that Jaws theme. And I did a thing at the end where the riff that I played just kept getting lower and lower and lower with an 8-string. So it got down real low, right? I think it went down a whole octave down from F sharp. So drop standard, or like a octave down standard tuning for an 8-string. And that's really, really, really low. Is that the limit? Is that the lower limit for where these things are going to go? And I can link those down in the video description, or the Spotify description, if Spotify will allow links like that, but I think they do. So you can go check those out and see what I mean. And maybe on the YouTube side, let me know your thoughts, or on that actual video, let me know your thoughts on what you think the lower limit is. Because I don't really know. I find myself slipping into thinking that, oh, that's the lower limit. And then time passes and I go, well, maybe that's the lower limit. And I keep going down and down and down. Because at a certain point, it just does sound cool. And yes, it can get completely overused and just completely cliched at this point for a lot of metal bands, and that's fine. You got to use them in interesting ways, like specifically a band called Haken, Haken. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. They use 8-string guitars in very interesting ways, and they're a progressive metal band all the way, and they find very interesting ways to use those 8-string guitars that aren't so cliche, just wow, 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 hitting the low string and just chug, 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 chug. They do really interesting things with them to create interesting sounds, and that's very inspirational. It's very inspiring because, again, people get trapped up in, well, that's too low. Everybody does it. Why would you do it? It's just going to sound the same. But it doesn't have to, because you can do things differently and add something new to the mix that makes them interesting. But at the same time, with the whole basis of this whole thing, is there a lower limit to which, even if you do something interesting, quote, that it doesn't matter because it's just so low in the register, it just sounds like mud. And yeah, obviously you're like, oh, if it's like 3 octaves below F sharp or whatever, or it's just completely inaudible to the human ear, then yeah, that's definitely too low because you can't discern the difference. And I think I reached some of those points in those 2 videos there of where it kind of starts to get very indiscernible. So is that the lower limit? Is that where things just need to stop? Is that where the natural coolness of tuning lower and lower loses its cool? Is there a specific tuning? Is there a specific note? Like, is it the brown note that makes everybody shit themselves? Like, what is that limit to stop at? And maybe I'm repeating myself a lot, but I just want to get the point across. Like, where is that point? And honestly, I couldn't really tell you definitively where that point is, where that lower limit is, because over time, my lower limit in my head has gone lower and lower. And I never thought I would get an 8-string before. And then I bought one. And then I never thought I would never drop tune it. And then I did. There's just something attractive about hitting those low notes. And as a guitar player, I think it gives you a sense of power. It's the same thing as like if you were on stage and you cranked your amp all the way to 11 and you hit a big power chord. Just that power that you feel from doing that. I think you get a similar effect to hitting a super low note on like an 8-string or 9-string or even 7-string. It just, I don't know. It's like it hits you in a different place. And as a player, it's empowering in an odd way. Because I can sit here and talk all day about how I need it to be interesting playing. I need it to be something that's not cliche. And the playing needs to be unique. But when I pick up my 8-string and I play stuff, sometimes just when I'm warming up and fucking around, I go blah 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 blah, play like genty stuff because it's fun. It's just fun. And I think when technology gets better with guitars to keep tuning stability strong, people are going to continue to go lower and lower. And does that mean the scale length of some of these guitars, when you get into like 11 or like 12 string, like 12 linear string, not like an acoustic 12 string, but 12 strings in a row guitars, are they going to be like so long in scale length that you can't play the lower frets or anything? Or are guitars going to have to fundamentally be changed? Or is there going to be a point where we all have to say, listen, it's been a fun ride and a journey down into these lower tunings, but we have certain physical capabilities to play these instruments, and the place that we have gotten to has surpassed and superseded that limit of creating an instrument that is playable. Maybe that's the lower limit, when we just physically can't play it anymore because the drive and the desire and attractiveness of just going lower and lower and tuning to that low, like drop F sharp, whatever you want to do. The attractiveness is always going to be there. And if history shows that idea of what's really low is going to get lower and lower and lower, eventually people are going to be like, no, drop E on an 8-string isn't low enough. We need something even lower, right? So what's that going to be? Drop B? Drop B? A whole fucking drop B situation? Who knows, right? It's a whole fourth down from what? It just baffles me. And maybe I'm talking in circles for this whole thing, but I've just always pondered the idea of, lower guitar, lower guitar, lower guitar, lower guitar. Why people have such a fascination with it. And I think some music mixed correctly using 8-string guitars sounds super like powerful. It's super, super powerful, and it's tight, right? If you can get it tight and sounding super thick and juicy, then it works so well. But then if you get it where it's not, then, like any bad mix, it just doesn't work. And then you're like, maybe the 8-string that's not mixed well adds to the B movie esqueness of this song, like the budget, like bedroom mix engineer sound, right? Low budget, like garage band sound. And maybe that's okay because people are just having fun. But if we want good music and we want music that does something, that progresses something for people, that creates some kind of emotion for people, what is that emotion going to be? Because the other thing to think about with tuning guitars so much lower is that there's a lower limit in terms of note spacing with intervals, where you get past a certain point and chords don't work the same as they do in higher registers, because as you get lower in frequency, the intervallic relationships between different notes, the distances get ever more so large, and then they just stop working together and they sound like garbage. Sound like an out of tune guitar. And I think that lower limit starts to hit with some 8 strings a little bit. I think if you do drop E, you can hit some power chords there with your and they sound okay, and then they start to get down like to not so in tune. But at the same time, if you're listening to metal music where there's a lot of chug and 8 strings involved, not necessarily having that perfectly in tune isn't such a bad thing. Like, that's kind of a thing. Having very dissonant chords and notes is sometimes part of the sound. So maybe it'll work no matter what. I can't say for sure. But I do believe getting down in that 8-string territory gets near that lower limit where chords just don't really work well. And it's one of those things that, do you need a bunch of chords, or is it enough to have the individual single notes? Or do you just say fuck it and play the very dissonant sounding chords anyway because they sound cool and they're brutal and it's metal, man? Like, there's a lot of good questions here to be asked. And my hope is to get some people in here soon to ask them these questions, so I'm not asking them to the void and trying to answer myself. And maybe I'll get some responses from you guys on YouTube or Spotify if there's a poll, but these are the questions I think we need to be having and discussing, because where do things stop? Where do we go from here? Things are already so low. How much lower can we get? And, you know, it's the advent of technology with guitars. Like, everybody now can make something sound good because you no longer have to mic up cabinets. You can just get some Neural DSP plugins and mix those in your bedroom, right? Out. You can just mix those in your bedroom and be fine. And there's no problem. And what does that say for where new things can emerge? You might find someone who creates a guitar that has a scale length like across my desk here. Right? I'll turn my desk into a guitar. I throw a pickup on one end, attach a string to outstretch the length of my desk, and doom, 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 hit that. Run it into my interface and run it through a Neural DSP plugin and play drop Z sharp, right? And it's going to sound good because it's running through an internal program in my computer because it's a direct signal and everything, and there's no miking it up. There's no mishap to make it sound bad. It's just going to sound like a note coming from an electric piano or something, right? It's just, it's there. And I don't know. It's something to think about. It's something to ponder, something to tickle the brain and make you think about where the world is going. So if you have any ideas or questions that you think I should also address in further episodes, maybe pertaining to this topic or another topic, leave them down in the comments below on YouTube and wherever you can on Spotify. There may be a poll or a place to put something down there. I believe I've been messing with that a little bit, but leave some feedback. Let me know, and I will definitely write down a lot of the questions and bring them up to the future guests of the podcast, and get that stuff out there for you guys to hear some other people's opinions on. But yeah, that the journey for lower and lower tunings. It's crazy, man. It's a crazy thing. I have been on my own lower tuning journey for quite a while, and I have gone further down the path than I ever thought I would way back when. So that just makes me think, who else is going to change? Where else are things going to go? Because it seems like even myself, I'm guilty of continuing to go lower. And I'll probably go lower and lower. And I'm sure I'm definitely going to buy some more 8 strings, like the Rich Henshaw signature model from Strandberg, the guitar player from Haken. I need that 8 string so bad. Headless and everything. It looks nice. It's got an awesome... It's an awesome guitar. That's a guitar of my dreams right now. But maybe I'll get a 9 string just for the fuck of it at some point. Who knows? Just to test it. Maybe I'll get it and like, it's not for me. Don't know until we get there. But yeah, this has been a conversation. A one-way conversation. But I think I've reached a good stopping point. So like I said, any feedback is appreciated. Stay metal, my friends, and I'll see you in the next episode.